we're kicking into the noon hour, and you're probably just getting after it over there.
Yeah, just getting after it.
All right, cool. Well, it's great to meet you. I had a great time reading Lost in Thought. I was actually on a flight from Kansas City to Denver, and I was actually going up to see some friends that were really enamored with the Stanley Hotel, and I was going to do I saw a comedy or a magic show in the basement of there, and we were going to have a whiskey tasting. So there was all this allure, and my wife caught me a couple times like looking out the window with the book, and I was lost in thought. So it was an actual moment of, capturing me in the moment.
Very
So
cool.
yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, your
But
mind's wandering. Where's it going?
that's the thing. And it was wandering so well. This book is such a interesting modern day, almost like a philosophical jaunt through what we're all living through. And at one point I remember somebody had said the amount of decisions that we make in one day, it's
Mhm.
astonishing the amount of things
Yes.
that we have to go through. And the more modern we get, the more things are around us. We are just assailed. And I found it fascinating with this book that we are really all lost in thought trying to figure out what the hell we're doing here.
I like that illusion, being a sail. I like that. The unconscious is sort of blowing us any way it wants, and
Yeah.
yet we think we got the rig. Yeah, I like that.
So what was the Big Bang moment? What was the alpha of you coming up with with this idea that actually said, I'm putting it on paper?
So yeah, it's I've done so much writing, and this one was just so specific. I can literally point to the moment when I decided I need to figure this out. And I had gotten an earworm, which is a terrible term. And what that is when you have a piece of music or a thought, it just repeats over and over. And I had been stuck on this Bon Jovi line in the back of my mind for just way too many hours that day. And I said to myself out loud, why can't I make this stop? And then I thought, yeah, why? And why can't I fall asleep? And why did I laugh at that? That wasn't funny. And wait a minute, why did I just say that? And all of a sudden, the whys just started compounding. And I started feeling that there was a puppet master, and I wanted to know who it was. And so I went down this research hole, which has been just a great joy for me. And just started reading and going to lectures. And there's so much now on the internet that you can pick up. You don't even need to go sometimes in person. And I met this neurophilosopher, Patricia Churchland, on my journey. And it just set me on this course to imagine, what if we really understood how little control we actually have? We're not deliberating the way we think we're deliberating.
Yeah.
We're being fed stories. It's our brain's job to tell us stories so that the world makes sense. And a large part of the time, the brain is not our friend. You know, that left side of your brain, the one that's talking in the back of your mind, it's not saying, God, you're so great. You were great in that lecture. You're so gorgeous. You're so smart. It's not saying that. It's
Yeah.
saying all kinds of other negative things. So yes, so I just went down this journey, and I thought, for me, I feel like there's a lack of interest and belief in science that has become more prevalent in the last 20 years. And I thought that I'm not a scientist, I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
And the route, I think, to science appreciation goes directly through entertainment.
Yeah.
So I decided to take a very clear narrative, fictional story that could be read just like that
Yeah.
and run this neuroscience theme underneath it.
I just finished a book that was kind of looking at the intersection of Churchill and Orwell, like what they were doing. And it's funny because history is a carousel, and what we're living through right now and what Churchill went up against is a lot of the themes and narratives that we're dealing with in America right now, but specifically the Orwellian notion of 1984, which makes me think about so much of what you're talking about in there about, this illusionary matrix kind of world we live in. And I think it's just been amplified with things like 9/11 and COVID. It's just muddled the waters so much. We don't know where the hell we stand anymore. There's so many decisions, an infinite amount of decisions and conspiracies, but we still don't know where the compass needle goes.
Right. And, for so many I mean, for what, 200,000 years, our choices were really simple. It's what are you killing? What are you eating? Where are you sleeping?
Yeah,
Very simple.
yeah,
And then in the last 100 years, all of a sudden choices have proliferated. And it's not, okay, we're going to bed. Are we gonna, we're gonna have sex or we're gonna go to sleep or we're gonna read a book? That's pretty much all there was
yeah,
120 years ago. And now there's films, which film, TV, which TV show, which music venue, which concert, I mean, which friend's house. It's just there's so many choices that more and more of what we decide to do is subliminal because we just can't handle it. The conscious mind is slow.
yeah.
The unconscious is very fast.
And the odd thing about the American mentality specifically is we think for some reason once we get past this election, we're going to all of a sudden gain some level of calm and clarity. But I don't believe that to be the case, especially with the tapestry you've woven in your book. It's like we're still going to be floating through this ambiguity of what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And who's in charge of
Right.
your own self? And this was so interesting for me is that this is so personal. Every single person should have this question. Who's making my choices for me? Inside my own head, what has worked on my genetics and my education and my socioeconomic environment and the friends I have and the family I have, and all those things come together and create bias in your brain. And that bias is making your choices.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you go back to when you were in grade school, what was your dream? Did you always want to be a writer? What was your dream ultimately?
That's so funny because I remember writing my first thing when I was 8 years old, and it was a poem about the Statue of Liberty. And I always should have been a writer, but it took me a really long time to get there because there is no clear path in the United States to be a writer, and no one encourages you
Yeah.
to be a writer.
Yeah.
It's just not something people want to see. So I tried a lot of different things, but always knew that that's what I was, not what I was doing, but what I was. And finally, lost my job. The advertising firm went under, and I'm living on unemployment in a basement in New York City. And think, you know what? I don't think I can get any worse than this. I mean, why don't I just give it a shot? And I looked at the United States and I said, there's only one place here you can live and make a good living as a writer, and that's Los Angeles. And I moved and I
Where were
started
you
screenwriting.
where were you born and raised?
New Jersey.
Okay, the Garden State.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what was the first thing that you wrote where you got a visceral experience or a visceral reaction from somebody that made you think, this is what I need to be doing? This is what I need to do with my life.
It really didn't come from outside.
Okay.
It came from inside. If I would write something, when I was working or looking for work or whatever I was doing, if I write something that it would make me, it was good. I thought it was good. It would make me feel good. And it was all about feeling good about yourself. And so it gave me a little bit of a sense of superiority, which I needed, to be able to think to myself, okay, well, I can't do that job, but I wrote this really cool paragraph last night,
So let's go back. I want to stay in childhood a little bit here, and I want to know what was your favorite book? What was the one that parted the curtains for you that made you think, I want to read voraciously or I want to write?
Um, while there are tons of books that could fit that category, the very first book that hit my heart was Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
I remember reading Charlotte's Web like it was yesterday, and I had to be very little. And I remember years later, I was listening to some radio show or interview or something, and they were talking about when they did the Audible version, and E.B. White, who was reading it himself, came to the point where she dies. They had to tape it 17 times before he stopped crying.
Wow.
And I thought, yeah, I feel that same way.
Wow, that's amazing.
That was a very powerful book for me. Other than that, it's just Dickens.
Yeah.
It's just Dickens. Yeah.
What about in the realm of screenwriting? What was the script that, once you started writing screenplay, you were like, that's genius.
So, okay, so interesting because I wrote in all different genres. I wrote thrillers, I wrote dramas, I wrote true story, I wrote adaptation, I wrote comedy. I wrote all those, and in each one of those genres, there's one that matters to me. Um, I guess I mean, Primal was really important only because it set me up. It was um, it was something I wrote. It's a very nasty, very profane thriller that I wrote because I'd been told over and over again, and this was, 30 years ago, that women can only be in children's programming. And I just felt like, God, we're walking around as prey in the parking lot. We know how to write scary. And so I wrote Primal in order to make that point. And then I had my agent, who was at CAA at the time, market it under my initials, DA Sarah. So it was gender neutral.
Yeah.
And because otherwise no one of consequence would have read it because it was a
Right.
thriller from a woman.
Yeah.
And James Cameron bought it.
Yeah.
And it just set me on a path to say, you know what, you can write anything you want. You just need to be good at it.
Yeah. There's that age-old question, or it's that notion that people bring up that real life is stranger than fiction. And since you've delved into both of the worlds, what's stranger? What genuinely to the heart and soul of our bones as a human, and in your experience, is stranger? Coming up making up a story or depicting something that happened?
Our brains are so strange.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are. I was at an event on Wednesday night. They were holding a book event for me over at the University of California, San Diego, and there was a neuroanatomist there. And he said something I thought was so interesting. He said, if you have two brains, any two brains anywhere in the world, any brain, they don't actually look the same. He said, you take them out and you're looking at all these brains and they're physically different. The folds are different, the grooves are different. And I thought,
Wow.
I mean, God, really? I almost, can I see that? It just really, that's strange,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
it's like fingerprints. Everybody's got a different
Yeah,
fingerprint, but they're generally the same. And I want to go back to a point that you made about science. Has it been so heavily politicized that people don't believe it? I can't, it's almost like saying two plus two is four. It's just an empirical thing,
yeah.
even with rising ocean levels and all of these different things that are actually happening. And in LA, there was unbelievable stretches of hot weather that was not by accident this
Yeah,
summer.
I know. I know. I know. And you know what? It's both sides of the political spectrum. There's extreme on both sides.
Yeah.
And we're all, many of us are just fighting for that middle ground where people understand the difference between fact and fiction. And one side, in my opinion, is way worse than the other. But you see it all over, and that's one of the reasons I think entertainment is important. I don't know how old you are, but I'll throw this out. There was the Civil Rights Act, 1965,
Okay.
very important, but that's not what made the shift. What made the shift in America was Archie Bunker coming into your living room every week with the Jeffersons, making fun and comedy out of our society. And All in the Family, Norman Lear and All in the Family really pushed the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. I think that entertainment has a real chance to get to people when they're not being lectured at. But yeah, no, the what no one believes in facts anymore. I mean, I'm not sure I do. I read the newspaper now, or I'll read something online. I'll go, I don't know if I can trust that.
Yeah. It's weird, and then you throw AI into all of this with them
Yeah.
manufacturing all these toys. But to get back to All in the Family, I'm 52 and I did grow up with that.
Oh,
And
you did?
yeah, and my dad kind of reminded me of Archie. My folks reminded me of both of them. There was just similarities. And but that was one of the first shows I remember where it would literally come to a dramatic place where it would stop you and
Yeah.
tears could come out of your eyes, or you would just be like, "Oh my God." They're actually putting something up there that really is getting to the heart, because there was all these feel good Brady Bunch and all these other shows, but I think shows like Good Times and All in the Family really,
Jeffersons.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Jeffersons.
Jeffersons, what a normal black family into your
Uh-huh.
into your living room.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that was kind of that's in the back of my mind. But push comes to shove, it's still a novel, it's
Yeah,
still a story. And I know that it needs to work on that level. I hope it does. I
yeah,
hope people are interested in this character, in her journey. I took her, Ilana, the main character, and put her up against these three different stresses. So I put her up against the stress from having a neuroscience boyfriend who's talking about choice and the choices you make. And then I put her up against an animal stress, a sexual stress that she was completely unexpected. And then I put her up against this older woman who's like a mentor who doesn't follow any of the rules of society that Ilana thought were immutable.
yeah.
And so I put her in all to take her to this point where she says, you know what? All I want is just one free move, just one free moment. How do I get it? And she has to go outside herself to get it.
So I'm curious, there's so many things that are so modern about your novel. Where do you see AI falling into this in the future? Are you fearful or are you okay with it?
I think, well, I'm not worried that AI is going to replace humans.
Right.
The human brain is incredibly complicated and anyone who's working on the human brain will tell you that. Obviously, there's a lot of damage that can be done with AI, a lot of damage, but it's going to revolutionize healthcare, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
There's going to be lots of jobs lost, the middle jobs, the paralegals, the radiologists, the people like that. But when I was in the hospital 2 months ago and they did a scan of me and I was sitting in the ER room with my husband, I looked at him and I said, God, I hope an AI is reading this thing. Because I don't know, maybe the radiologist had a bad lunch, maybe
Right.
she's mad at her husband, maybe I don't, so there are areas where it's going to really help us.
Yeah.
But, and we need to take care of the areas where it's going to be a problem.
So at the end of the day, you've picked a profession, and I don't know how many people out there understand how hard writing can be, especially
Mhm.
with what you're doing. Taking something from an idea to actually a film and a screenplay and all these other manifestations. With that being said, who has been that inspiration, that hero that's pushed you to continually be better and to do this very hard job you have?
I have a very supportive family. I have a very large, very loud, gregarious family. And they have always treated me as though I were a valuable writer. Even when I was not making money and I still wondered if I would ever make money making as a writer. And of course, in novels, you're never going to make money. You have to make money in screenwriting and then you can leave it and then go to novels. But that really is has always been the core of my support. And also, of course, my dog,
Yeah. Dogs
because
are always.
there's just nothing like having a dog at your feet.
That's right. They're miraculous. I remember interviewing a guy that was kind of into the whole like vet animal world. And I was like, what's your animal? And he was like, dogs are the most amazing things of all of them. Hippos, rhinos, giraffes, all these exotic animals. And he's like, dogs have this way. I mean, what blows me away is that you could leave the room for a half hour and come back, and that tail will still slap around like they've never seen you
Yeah,
before.
still happy to see you. Happy you've come back.
That's it.
Not going to complain about anything you've done in the last half hour.
It. You're totally sinless. You're perfect. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the version of you right before you decide that you're going to go for it as a writer, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you impart on that version of you?
It's, and I had that moment in the basement when I decided it's not looking back, I would say, try not to be so captured by the American program, which is you are not successful if you have not made money. That's the American program. Try not to be so captured by it. Yeah, it's important, but I could have left screenwriting earlier, but I was captured by the money. And I think it would be better if there had been a better balance for me. Because I spent a lot of time writing things I really didn't like.
Yeah,
And I spent a lot of time taking notes from people in a room, network executives and studio executives that could not do what I do, but were really easy to tell me what I was doing wrong.
yeah,
It's soul crushing,
yeah.
So I should have been able to give that up sooner. That would be my advice to me.
So you've had all of these moments with big actors and names, like you mentioned James Cameron, but what was the first time that you had a brush with that world that made you think, wow, like some level of validation, some level of like cleansing your soul for all of those moments that you just mentioned that you went through? Was there a moment like that for you?
Mm. Not really, because it's a slow crawl, It's, you sell this one thing and then you sell that one thing. And then I of the films that I like that I wrote the most that are originals that were not assignments, the two of them, neither one of them got made. Got
Yeah,
sold, but it didn't get made.
yeah,
So it's a crushing thing. To try and keep throwing out product that you're proud of out there and still being told, no, 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 you need to write this TV movie of the week about, this woman who has a disease.
yeah.
It, so that I never had sort of a revelatory moment, but I have worked with some really wonderful people, and it was a really great experience. And I know how lucky I am to have been so successful doing that. And I wish I had left a little earlier.
My mental image of a writer's brain is it's kind of like that lottery thing after the news where all the balls are flopping around and everything's going and then the number comes spitting out. How do you process and actually capture the ideas? How does the idea mill work for you? And how do you capture it in audio, to capture it in little slips of paper? How does that process work?
It's not so. I usually hear characters in my head. Most of my work begins with a character.
Okay.
Oddly, not this one, because this one I had something I wanted to say. Lost in Thought was something I wanted to say. But generally, it starts with a line a character says in my head, and everything grows from that line. And many, many times that is sparked by something else I'm reading, by a book I'm reading where I wish there were another character, or I wish a character had said this, or that reminds me of something else. And something sparks a line of dialogue. It's always dialogue in my head. And then the character grows from the dialogue. And then I think, well, what's this character's life like? And then the story grows from there.
Okay. So let's say we get off this call, time machine pulls up in front of your house. You can go anywhere in human history and see one event with your own eyes. Where are you going?
Oh, man. Am I safe?
Yeah, yeah, you're just gonna view it, no tear in time, everything's safe.
Okay. Okay. Probably the fall of Troy.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I want to go to Helen and I want to say, okay, let's settle this once and for all. Did you leave willingly or were you taken? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. But yeah, it
scholars are
won't.
still arguing about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it won't affect anything. So I'm curious, and there's a lot of existentialism that goes into what you've explored with your book. Are you hopeful for humanity? Are you hopeful for where we're going right now, coming out of a pandemic, the things that are happening leading into the election? Do you feel glowy and hopeful?
I got to tell you, I have always been a pessimist. My whole life, I've been pessimistic. And I married a man who's just a complete optimist. And I'm sure that that happened on purpose. But is it Ben Franklin who said, I think I'd rather be a pessimist, so I'm always pleasantly surprised?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just think I don't know if you've read any of Yuval Noah Harari's books. He's got Amadeus and Sapiens, and now a new one out, I think called Nexus. And I can only read them in small chunks because he's the only person. Well, first of all, he's probably the most brilliant writer, author, scholar, historian in the world today, or maybe ever. But his it's so pessimistic that I have to read just pieces of it and then go back and read something else. And that, yeah, but I believe everything he says is true.
Yeah.
So we're just species, we're just another species,
Yeah.
it's just a function of when our time is up.
Well, I always think about Carl Sagan with that history of time, when they really unravel how tiny we are on the very
Yeah.
infinitesimal, like sand spotted arm of history. It is really just, I mean, it's unbelievably small.
And it would do us well to realize we are just one biological being on this planet at this moment in time.
Right.
We might be kinder to each other and kinder to other animals. And, it's, but we're very full of ourselves.
Yeah, we certainly are. So I got to know, you mentioned this author. If you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, spend some time with them, see how they work, who would that be?
Well, I would I would follow Yuval Harari. I would not be able to speak to him because he's so far beyond anything I could understand. I would love to have spent some time with Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, he's gone now a few years. I just found him really fascinating. And I feel like he's someone I could sit down and talk to.
yeah,
Whereas Harari, no, I'd probably just be listening.
yeah, right. So of all of these things that you've done with your life and accomplished and overcome, what are you the proudest of?
I'm probably really proud of this book, but
Yeah,
I'm also very proud of um, the world that my whole family has created with each other, which is a very unique environment. And we've never seen another family quite like ours. And so I'm kind of proud of that. I'll take some credit for that. But for my working life, this book is the one I'm most proud of.
so are you pushing this to get on the screen? How is this gonna work? What's the development?
Nope. I wrote this because I didn't write this for an audience. I wrote this for myself.
Gotcha.
And if people read it and it goes somewhere, great. And if they don't, the reward was in the writing for this one. And I'm not pushing it. I'm just, letting people know that it's there and hope that it makes you think. I'm not maybe in as much control as I think I am, and maybe you aren't either. The consequences of not understanding that are practical. I mean, you look at the legal system, they're practical. Our
Yeah,
whole legal system is built on intent.
yeah,
And you need to understand the different intent and the ability of self-control or the inability to have self-control. And that needs to be reflected in our legal system, and it's not.
yeah. So everyone out there has a perception of you. Family, friends, everyone that's bought your books, everyone that's ingested your creative writing energy, but ultimately you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Do I run the show? I don't think I do.
Well, you run your show. You run the way that we all perceive you.
Yeah. And what's the question? How do I see me?
Yeah, because everybody when you enter into different roles with your family or with people that at publishing houses or people that literally buy your books, they all perceive you in a certain way. But you ultimately are the guiding force between the id, ego, superego. So what is your perception of who you are?
I'm a writer. I'm a dancer. I'm an animal lover. And I really just never really gave that much interior thought to that. I think, one of the issues for me, and I know this is the issue for most people, it's running so fast all the time, it's just I'm just trying to keep up. And so and that's one of the things, I don't spend a lot of time in self-reflection. I
Yeah.
just keep moving on. What's the next thing? I'm doing so we get off this call, I've got to edit these short stories for this magazine. And it's just the next thing. And frankly, I'd like to learn to meditate or take that time and be in the moment and all that, because I am battered like most people are about the next thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think about myself that way, but that's negative, you see. That's a pessimist.
The one thing whenever I talk to whether it's a musician or an author, it's like you're already moving on to the next thing. How
Yeah.
far down the road from Lost in Thought are you right now?
I am not giving another project even a thought.
Okay.
I'm just not. If something happens, then something happens. But I was so restricted for so long, from this movie to that movie to that, and writing in a box. It's got to be this many pages, and it's got to, stop at this moment so we can do a commercial or whatever. That I am just loving the freedom of getting up in the morning and thinking, you know, maybe I'll just go take a walk with the dog. And something comes, it comes.
Isn't that the beauty of art, though, is the freedom to be able to do that, to literally be an improv?
Now, yeah, when you're
Right?
working in the screen world, no.
Yeah,
A deadline is we're going on at 8 o'clock Friday is a real deadline.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, Lost in Thought, if anyone wants to pick up a copy, they want to pick up any of your other wonderful works, where's the best place to go?
Oh, anywhere you want to go. You can go to
Okay.
Barnes& and Noble, you can go to Amazon, you can go to your favorite bookstore and order it anywhere.
Okay. Excellent. Again, I
Get
love
it.
the book. Thank you so much for taking a minute out. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate that. I really do.
Yes, thank you.